Human history is often told as a steady, predictable march, a narrative etched into textbooks and timelines, seemingly set in stone. But sometimes a discovery emerges from the earth that doesn't just add a footnote, but forces us to rip out entire pages and question the very foundations of the story we thought we knew. Welcome to the Purple Files. Today we journey back almost 12,000 years to explore a discovery that has done exactly that. A place that is radically challenging our understanding of the dawn of human civilization. The conventional story goes like this. First we learned to farm, then we settled down. Only then, with stable food supplies and permanent villages, did we develop complex societies, build grand monuments, and create organized religion. It's a logical progression from simple survival to complex civilization. For decades, this was the accepted narrative, but high on a limestone plateau in the Jirmus Mountains of southeastern Turkey, near the ancient city of Sanliurfa, lies a site that throws this entire sequence into question. It's known locally as Gobekli Tepe, Turkish for Potbelly Hill. For generations it was just another hill, notable mainly for scattered flint tools and a lone sacred mulberry tree. No one suspected the profound secrets buried just beneath the soil. Because beneath the surface of Gobekli Tepe lies evidence of human endeavor on a scale previously unimaginable for its time. Archaeologists have unearthed multiple massive stone enclosures dominated by intricately carved T-shaped pillars, some standing over 18 feet tall and weighing many tons. This is not a settlement, not a village, but something else, a vast complex deliberately constructed for ritual, for ceremony, perhaps for the very practice of belief itself. And here is the truly revolutionary fact. Gobekli Tepe is staggeringly old. Its earliest structures date back roughly 11,600 years to around 9600 BCE. This places it at the very dawn of the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age. It is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, 7,000 years older than the earliest pyramids. It predates the invention of pottery, the invention of writing, the smelting of metals, and crucially, it predates the widespread adoption of agriculture and the domestication of animals. This is the central, profound mystery of Gobekli Tepe. The people who built this astonishing place were, by all previous understanding, supposed to be small bands of nomadic or semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers. How did people without agriculture, without permanent villages, without metal tools, manage to quarry, transport, carve, and erect these colossal stone monuments? How did they organize the labor? What powerful beliefs drove them to invest such immense effort in this remote hilltop? What if the need for ritual, for a shared sacred space, came first? The discovery of Gobekli Tepe hasn't just added an earlier chapter to our history books, it's forcing us to rethink the very plot. It suggests that our capacity for complex thought, symbolic expression, communal effort, and perhaps even organized religion emerged far earlier and played a much more dynamic role in shaping civilization than we ever imagined. Join us as we journey back nearly 12 millennia to explore the secrets of Potbelly Hill and uncover the story of the temple that is rewriting the dawn of human history. The journey to uncovering Gobekli Tepe's profound secrets wasn't straightforward. The hill itself had actually been noted decades earlier. In the 1960s, archaeological surveys conducted by researchers from the universities of Istanbul and Chicago swept through this region, mapping potential sites. They documented Gobekli Tepe, observing the numerous flint tools scattered across its surface and the presence of large, broken limestone slabs. However, based on the prevailing understanding at the time, they drew a different conclusion. The limestone slabs were interpreted as possible remnants of a long-abandoned medieval cemetery. The dense scatter of flint was seen as evidence of natural erosion, exposing flint nodules, or perhaps later, unrelated stone knapping activity. They saw nothing to suggest monumental architecture from the dawn of the Neolithic. The hill was recorded, catalogued, but ultimately dismissed as holding no major prehistoric significance. Gobekli Tepe's true identity remained hidden in plain sight. Fast forward nearly 30 years, German archaeologist Klaus Schmitz, working with the German Archaeological Institute, DAI, was deeply immersed in the study of the early Neolithic in southeastern Anatolia. He had spent years excavating at Nevali Kori, a site roughly 50 kilometers northwest, which had yielded T-shaped pillars within rectangular buildings dating to around 8400 BCE. Schmidt was actively searching for other, potentially earlier sites that could illuminate this crucial period of human transition. In 1994, while reviewing those decades-old survey reports, Schmidt paused at the description of Gobekli Tepe. The mention of limestone slabs and abundant flint piqued his interest. His experience at Navali Kori provided a crucial lens the earlier surveyors lacked. He knew that T-shaped pillars were a feature of the early Neolithic in this region. The sheer density of flint described suggested something more than casual activity, perhaps the debris from constructing something significant. Could the gravestones actually be the tops of buried megalithic pillars? Driven by this hypothesis, Schmidt visited Gobekli Tepe himself. The moment he walked across the summit, his suspicions solidified into certainty. The landscape was littered not just with flint tools, but with the debitage, the waste flakes, from making thousands of them, and the protruding limestone slabs were unmistakably the tops of massive, T-shaped monolithic pillars, similar to those at Navali Kori, but seemingly much larger and older. He recognized instantly that this was no forgotten cemetery. This was a Stone Age sanctuary of potentially unparalleled scale and antiquity. As he later recalled, he knew within moments this would be his life's work. In 1995, Schmidt, in cooperation with the Sanliurfa Museum and the Day, launched full-scale excavations. The work was methodical and challenging. They quickly realized they weren't just digging down to find structures. The entire upper part of the hill was an artificial mound, a tell, nearly 15 meters, 50 feet high, and 300 meters, 1,000 feet, across. But unlike typical tells formed by collapsing mud brick houses over centuries, Gobekli Tepe's mound was composed largely of filled debris. Stone fragments, tools, animal bones, and soil deliberately packed around and eventually burying the stone enclosures. As the teams carefully peeled back the layers of millennia, the true nature of the site began to emerge. They uncovered a series of large, roughly circular or oval enclosures. Each enclosure featured massive T-shaped limestone pillars embedded within stone walls, surrounding two even larger freestanding tillers at the center. The first four major structures uncovered in this main, older layer, known as Layer 3, were designated enclosures A, B, C, and D. And then came another astonishment. The pillars were richly decorated with sophisticated bas-reliefs, a vibrant menagerie of animals like foxes, snakes, boars, gazelles, cranes, vultures, insects, and spiders, alongside abstract symbols, including stylized human hands and loincloths carved onto the pillars themselves. The implications were staggering. Here was clear evidence of monumental architecture, complex symbolism, and large-scale communal effort dating back to the 10th millennium BCE, a time previously associated only with small, mobile hunter-gatherer groups. The discovery challenged everything thought known about the capabilities and social organization of prehistoric peoples. Klaus Schmidt and his team hadn't just found an old site, they had opened a window onto a lost world that was forcing a fundamental rewrite of human history. The meticulous work of excavation had begun, but the task of interpretation was just starting. The initial excavations at Gobekli Tepe focused on its most ancient and arguably most spectacular phase, designated Layer 3. Dating primarily to the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, roughly between 9600 and 8800 BCE, this layer revealed a series of monumental circular or oval enclosures sunk into the hillside. These were not simple huts or houses, they were sophisticated architectural undertakings on a scale previously unknown for this era. Among the earliest and largest uncovered is Enclosure D, often considered the archetypal Gobekli Tepe structure. Roughly 20 meters, 65 feet across, it exemplifies the core design principle. Two colossal, freestanding T-shaped pillars dominate the center, oriented roughly southeast, surrounded by a ring of slightly smaller T-pillars embedded within thick, dry stone walls. Between these peripheral pillars, low stone benches run along the inner circumference of the wall, suggesting spaces for participants or offerings. The central pillars of enclosure D, known as Pillar 18 and Pillar 31, are true masterpieces of Neolithic art and engineering. Standing around 5.5 meters, 18 feet tall, each was carved from a single block of limestone. Crucially, they display clear anthropomorphic features, confirming the T-shape is intentional stylization. Thin arms are carved in low relief along their sides, with hands and long fingers meeting above intricate belts or loincloths decorated with abstract symbols, possibly H and U shapes. Suspended from these belts, on Pillar 18, are reliefs interpreted as fox pelts. These are not mere abstract monoliths, they are stylized representations of human-like beings, perhaps ancestors, deities, or mythical figures presiding over the space. The surrounding pillars in enclosure D, though smaller, around 3.4 meters tall, are no less significant. They are adorned with a stunning array of high-relief animal carvings, depicted with remarkable naturalism and dynamism. We see processions of ducks, prowling foxes, charging boars, formidable aurochs, graceful gazelles, long-legged cranes, and numerous snakes slithering across the stone surfaces. One pillar, Pillar 43, is particularly famous. Often called the vulture stone, it features a complex scene dominated by a large vulture seemingly interacting with a headless human body, alongside other animals and symbols. Interpretations vary wildly. A depiction of funerary rites involving excarnation, exposure of the dead to be stripped clean by birds, astronomical events, or a complex mythological narrative. Whatever its precise meaning, it speaks volumes about the sophisticated symbolic world of Gobekli Tepe's builders. Adding to the sophistication of enclosure D is its floor. It wasn't simple packed earth. Excavations revealed a carefully prepared surface made of terrazzo, burnt lime and clay mixed with limestone chips, polished to a smooth, hard, almost concrete-like finish. Creating such a floor required advanced pyrotechnology, the ability to control fire to burn limestone into quicklime, another unexpected capability for hunter-gatherers of this period. Nearby lies enclosure C, similar in overall design to D, but slightly smaller and perhaps slightly later within Layer 3. It also features two central T-pillars and a ring of peripheral ones set in stone walls with benches. While sharing the general animal repertoire, enclosure C seems to place a particular emphasis on boars, which appear frequently and prominently on its pillars. Its central pillars are also carved, though perhaps less elaborately than those in D. One intriguing feature found near enclosure C was a U-shaped stone with a hole, possibly an entrance portal or a symbolic passageway. Enclosure B is adjacent to D and shares the same fundamental plan, though it's more oval than circular. Its two central pillars are slightly smaller than D's, standing around 4 meters, 13 feet, tall. One of its peripheral pillars features a notable relief of a fox. The quality of preservation and the extent of excavation vary between enclosures, giving us snapshots rather than the complete picture for each. Enclosure A, one of the first identified, is sometimes dubbed the snake pillar building due to the prevalence of snake reliefs found on its pillars. It follows the established pattern, but again shows variations in size and specific iconography, reinforcing the idea that while sharing a common purpose, each enclosure may have had its own specific focus or dedication within the broader belief system. Contemplating these structures forces us to confront the staggering challenge of their construction. The builders lived in a pre-metal age. They quarried these multi-ton limestone monoliths from nearby bedrock outcrops, using only tools made of flint, basalt, or other hard stones. Pounders, picks, and scrapers, transporting pillars weighing up to 10-20 tons, and in some cases perhaps even more, over distances of several hundred meters, likely uphill, would have required immense coordinated manpower. Log rollers, ropes, and possibly sledges pulled by dozens, if not hundreds of people, are hypothesized. Erecting them into sockets carved into the bedrock or floor would have necessitated sophisticated techniques, perhaps involving earthen ramps, wooden levers, scaffolding, and sheer collective effort. The carving itself, executed with such precision and artistry, using only pointed flint tools, speaks of specialized knowledge and dedicated craftspeople. Creating the high reliefs, the detailed animal forms, the intricate symbols, and the smooth finish on the pillars was a laborious process, demanding skill, patience, and time. Layer 3 at Gobekli Tepe represents not just isolated structures, but a vast integrated ritual landscape. At least 4 major enclosures have been significantly excavated, but geophysical surveys suggest many more, perhaps up to 20, remain buried across the hill. The sheer scale of coordinated labor required, quarrying, transporting, erecting, carving, building walls, preparing floors, and eventually deliberately backfilling these massive structures, points towards a level of social organization and shared purpose far exceeding what was previously thought possible for pre-agricultural societies. These monuments stand as testament to a powerful ideology that could mobilize communities on an unprecedented scale long before the first cities arose. The monumental structures of Gobekli Tepe's Layer 3 are impressive in their own right, but it's the intricate carvings that adorn them which offer the most tantalizing glimpse into the minds of their creators. These are not random doodles or simple decorations. They constitute a complex and coherent symbolic system, a visual language communicating the beliefs, myths, and worldview of people living nearly 12,000 years ago. Unlocking their precise meaning remains one of archaeology's greatest challenges, but the images themselves speak volumes about the sophisticated cognition of these early Neolithic societies. Central to this symbolic world are the T-shaped pillars themselves. As we saw, the largest examples, particularly the central pairs in enclosures like D, are clearly anthropomorphic, stylized representations of human-like figures. The T-shape provides an abstract head and shoulders. Arms are carved in low relief down the narrow edges, their long, spindly fingers meeting above ornate belts carved across the wider front surface. These belts feature abstract symbols, H-shapes, crescents, and other geometric forms, perhaps denoting status, identity, or specific ritual paraphernalia. Pillar 18 in enclosure D even has what appears to be a fox pelt hanging from its belt, further emphasizing its symbolic attire. Significantly, none of the T-pillars discovered so far have discernible facial features, no eyes, nose, or mouth. This anonymity seems deliberate. Are these generic representations of powerful beings, perhaps ancestors revered collectively, or primordial deities whose individuality was not meant to be depicted? Could they be spirit entities encountered in shamanic trances, their forms familiar yet fundamentally other? The T-shape itself might hold meaning, perhaps representing a specific posture, a cosmic axis, or simply an established convention for depicting these important figures. Their arrangement is also key. The giant central pairs often face inwards or towards the enclosure entrance, presiding over the space, while the peripheral pillars face towards the center, creating the sense of a gathering, a congregation of silent stone sentinels. If the pillars represent the central figures, the reliefs covering them depict the vibrant, often dangerous, natural and supernatural world they inhabited or presided over. The Gobekli Tepe bestiary is extensive and specific. We see a striking prevalence of creatures that were likely significant threats or held potent symbolic value. Numerous cunning foxes, slithering snakes often depicted in tangled groups, large and aggressive wild boars, formidable aurochs, the wild ancestors of cattle, and birds like cranes, ducks, ibis, and the imposing vulture. Smaller, but potentially deadly creatures like scorpions and spiders also appear. These animals are rendered with remarkable skill, often in dynamic high relief that makes them seem to leap from the stone. While naturalistic in form, there's a stylization that suggests symbolic intent rather than simple wildlife illustration. Interestingly, many identifiable animals appear to be male, and there's a noticeable lack of common prey animals like deer, though gazelles appear, or depictions of plants and domestic scenes. This isn't a portrayal of everyday life. It's a curated selection of powerful, numinous, and often dangerous aspects of the wild world central to the builder's cosmology. Perhaps the most complex and debated single composition is found on Pillar 43 in enclosure D, the Vulture Stone. It presents a dense narrative tableau. Dominating the scene is a large vulture, wings partially spread, standing beside or interacting with a headless human figure depicted lying down or squatting. Below this central pair is a prominent scorpion, Other birds, possibly cranes or ibis, and further carvings fill the space. At the bottom edge, a shape resembling a handbag or container is visible. What does this intricate scene signify? One prominent theory links it to funerary practices, specifically excarnation, the ritual exposure of the dead for birds of prey like vultures to consume the flesh, leaving bones for later burial. Headless figures and vultures are associated with death rituals at later Neolithic sites like Çatalhöyük. The headless figure could represent the deceased undergoing this process. Alternatively, the scene might depict a shamanic journey or transformation. Headlessness can symbolize altered states of consciousness or spirit flight, with the vulture acting as a psychopomp, a guide between worlds. The scorpion could represent death, danger, or perhaps a specific constellation. It might also simply be telling a specific myth, a foundational story unknown to us today. More controversially, some researchers propose an astronomical interpretation, suggesting the animals represent constellations: Scorpio, Sagittarius, Cygnus the swan, often linked to the vulture, and the scene records a significant celestial event, perhaps even the catastrophic comet impact hypothesized to have triggered the Younger Dryas cooling period around 10,900 BCE. While intriguing, this astronomical connection remains highly debated within the scientific community. Beyond the vulture stone, other motifs recur. Foxes are remarkably common, sometimes depicted alone, sometimes in groups. Were they trickster figures, symbols of cunning, guardians, or linked to a specific clan or lineage, as suggested by the pelt on Pillar 18? Snakes frequently appear, often intertwined. They universally carry connotations of danger, transformation, shedding skin, fertility, and connection to the earth or underworld. The powerful boar likely symbolized aggression, strength, and the dangers of the wild hunt. Its prominence in Enclosure C perhaps indicating a special significance there. Interspersed with the animal figures are numerous abstract symbols. We see hay shapes, both upright and sideways. U-shapes, like the large pierced stone found near Enclosure C, sometimes called a sealing stone or portal stone. Crescents and discs, suggesting sun and moon. Parallel lines and net-like patterns. These appear on the pillars, prominently on the belts of the anthropomorphic figures, and sometimes as the main motif on smaller stone plaques or objects found at the site. Their meaning is entirely lost to us, but their consistent repetition suggests they formed a crucial part of the symbolic vocabulary. Were they tribal or clan markers, representations of ritual objects, early counting systems, or perhaps rudimentary astronomical or seasonal markers? While certainly not writing as we know it, they represent a complex system of graphic communication. The carvings of Gobekli Tepe's Layer 3 transform the site from a collection of impressive structures into a profound statement of belief. They reveal a world populated by powerful, human-like entities, dangerous and symbolically charged animals, and abstract concepts rendered in stone. This was a place for engaging with the fundamental forces of life, death, nature, and the cosmos, as understood by these early Neolithic people. While we struggle to decipher the exact grammar of their visual language across the gulf of 12 millennia, the complexity, coherence, and artistic power of their symbols are undeniable. They paint a picture of human intellectual and spiritual life at the dawn of the Neolithic that is vastly richer and more complex than we ever imagined. The stone sentinels of Gobekli Tepe stand as silent witnesses to an astonishing human achievement. But who were the people who conceived, built, and gathered within these monumental enclosures nearly 12,000 years ago? The sheer scale and sophistication of the site present a profound paradox because all available evidence points towards a conclusion that, until Gobekli Tepe's discovery, seemed impossible. The builders were hunter-gatherers. Our long-held models dictated that monumental architecture and complex ritual centers were the products of settled agricultural societies. Societies with food surpluses, stored resources, and the hierarchical structures needed to manage large labor forces. Hunter-gatherers, typically imagined as small, mobile, egalitarian bands focused primarily on subsistence, were simply not thought capable of such undertakings. Gobekli Tepe forces us to discard these assumptions and reconstruct our picture of life at the dawn of the Neolithic. So, what does the direct archaeological evidence tell us about the people of Gobekli Tepe? Crucially, the vast quantities of animal bones excavated from the site's fill layers provide a clear picture of their diet. Thousands upon thousands of bones have been analysed, belonging overwhelmingly to wild species. Gazelle seems to have been a primary food source, alongside wild boar, aurochs, onager, fox, and various birds. There is virtually no evidence for domesticated animals like sheep, goats, or cattle during the main Layer 3 period, though the dog may have been present, potentially aiding in hunts. Similarly, while plant remains are harder to recover, analyses suggest the gathering of wild cereals, nuts, pistachios, almonds, and berries from the surrounding landscape. This is the signature of a hunter-gatherer subsistence strategy. Their toolkit further confirms this picture. Gobekli Tepe is littered with tens of thousands of flint artifacts. These include projectile points for hunting, scrapers likely used for processing animal hides, blades for cutting, and crucially, sturdy burins and chisels, the very tools likely used to carve the limestone pillars and reliefs. The sheer quantity of tool-making debris, debitage, indicates intensive activity at the site. Furthermore, the presence of obsidian tools, a volcanic glass not found locally, tells us these groups were part of wider networks. The obsidian has been traced to sources hundreds of kilometers away in Cappadocia and eastern Anatolia, indicating long-distance travel, trade, or exchange connections. Significantly, within the main ritual precinct of Layer 3, archaeologists have found no definitive evidence of permanent domestic habitation. There are no typical houses with hearths, no long-term storage pits, none of the usual debris associated with daily village life. This strongly suggests Gobekli Tepe itself was not a settlement where people lived year-round. It was a special-purpose site, a sanctuary or ceremonial center likely visited periodically, perhaps seasonally, by groups whose actual base camps or settlements were located elsewhere in the region, possibly down in the valleys closer to water sources. But how could hunter-gatherers organize the immense labor required to build Gobekli Tepe? Quarrying, transporting multi-tone pillars, carving intricate reliefs, constructing massive enclosures, and eventually backfilling them, these tasks demanded the coordinated effort of potentially hundreds of people over extended periods. This implies a level of social complexity previously unsuspected for non-agricultural groups. There must have been mechanisms for mobilizing labor from different bands, systems for planning and directing the work, and perhaps emerging leadership roles, even if temporary or situational. One powerful clue lies in the evidence for massive feasts. The enormous quantities of animal bones found in the fill are not just random food waste. Many show cut marks from butchery and evidence of cooking. Alongside these bones, archaeologists have found large stone troughs or basins, some capable of holding over 150 liters. What were these used for? While water storage is possible, Klaus Schmidt and others proposed a compelling theory. They were used for communal food preparation, or perhaps even for brewing a simple form of beer from fermented wild grains. Large-scale feasting would have been a powerful social lubricant, a way to attract workers from across the region, reward their labor, foster alliances, build group identity, and reinforce the ritual significance of the gatherings. The feasts themselves may have been as important as the construction. The sophistication of the architecture and art also suggests emerging specialization. It's likely that not everyone could carve stone with such skill. There may have been dedicated craftspeople, individuals recognized for their artistic or engineering abilities. Similarly, organizing the logistics and perhaps presiding over the rituals may have fallen to specific individuals or groups, nascent leaders or ritual specialists, perhaps shamans who mediated between the human and spirit worlds depicted on the pillars. What about the people themselves? While Gobekli Tepe wasn't a cemetery in the traditional sense, human remains have been found, though mostly fragmented and often mixed within the fill debris of the enclosures, particularly from the later phases. Intriguingly, some human skull fragments show evidence of deliberate modification, cut marks, scraping, even drilling, and in one case from a later context, carved decorations. This resonates with finds from other early Neolithic sites in the region, suggesting complex mortuary practices and perhaps a skull cult, the veneration or special treatment of human heads, possibly those of revered ancestors or defeated enemies. It adds another layer to the interpretation of the vulture stone and the headless figure, hinting at elaborate rituals surrounding death and the transition between life and afterlife. It's important to remember Gobekli Tepe didn't exist in isolation. It was part of a broader landscape of cultural ferment across the northern Fertile Crescent during the early Neolithic. Sites like Nevali Kori, with its smaller T-pillars in rectangular buildings, Kayonu Tepesi, with its skull building and early evidence of copper use, and Jef el Ahmar in Syria, with its communal structures, all show related developments. Gobekli Tepe seems to represent the earliest and most monumental expression of a shared ideology and burgeoning social complexity that was transforming hunter-gatherer societies across this entire region. The people of the pillars therefore emerged not as simple foragers, but as sophisticated hunter-gatherers, living through a period of profound social and ideological change. They possessed rich symbolic worlds, advanced technical skills, extensive social networks, and the ability to organize massive collective projects driven by powerful beliefs. They challenge our definitions of complexity and demonstrate that the path towards civilization was perhaps less linear, more varied, and far more ancient than we ever knew. Gobekli Tepe is their enduring legacy, a testament to human ingenuity and the deep-seated need for meaning and community etched in stone at the dawn of a new world. For centuries, perhaps over 800 years, the monumental circular enclosures of Gobekli Tepe's Layer 3 served as powerful centers for ritual, feasting, and communal gathering. The giant T-pillars, covered in intricate carvings, stood witness to the beliefs and social dynamics of the early Neolithic hunter-gatherers who built them. But Gobekli Tepe was not static. Like any place of enduring human significance, it evolved. Over time, a new phase of activity emerged, designated Layer 2, representing a distinct shift in architecture, scale, and perhaps even the nature of the rituals performed on Potbelly Hill. Dating primarily to the early and middle pre-pottery Neolithic B period, PPNB, roughly between 8800 and 8000 BCE, Layer 2 marks a significant architectural departure. Instead of the large, sunken communal circles, the builders now constructed smaller, rectangular or sub-rectangular rooms, often clustered together. These structures were generally built at a higher level, sometimes directly overlying the deliberately backfilled enclosures of Layer 3, using the older monuments as foundations for the new. The walls were still typically made of dry stone, but the overall layout suggests a different use of space. Crucially, the tradition of erecting T-shaped pillars continued into Layer 2, demonstrating a clear cultural and symbolic continuity. However, these later pillars are markedly different. They are generally much smaller, typically standing only 1.5 to 2 meters, around 5.5 feet tall, making them more manageable but less imposing than their Layer 3 predecessors. While some Layer 2 pillars still bear reliefs of animals, snakes, birds, quadrupeds, and abstract symbols, many are plain, lacking the rich, detailed carving seen in the earlier enclosures. Furthermore, instead of just two dominant central pillars, Layer 2 rooms often contain multiple pairs of these smaller T-pillars, sometimes up to a dozen within a single space, suggesting a different internal arrangement or focus. A well-preserved example of this later architecture is the so-called Lion Pillar building. This rectangular structure features several pairs of small T-pillars. Two of these pillars are notable for bearing reliefs of predatory felines, possibly lions or leopards, giving the building its name. This structure exemplifies the Layer 2 style. Rectangular form, smaller scale, multiple pillars, yet still retaining the core T-pillar symbolism and animal iconography, albeit in a modified form. The material culture associated with Layer 2 also shows subtle shifts. While flint tools remain abundant, archaeologists find an increase in items like finely crafted polished limestone bowls, plates, and containers, sometimes with intricate decorations. Mortars and pestles become more common, possibly indicating increased processing of wild grains or other plant materials. Tools like shaft straighteners, used for making arrows or spears, are also found. While still lacking definitive evidence of permanent domestic occupation within the main monumental area, the range of artifacts might suggest slightly different activities, or perhaps longer stays at the site compared to the peak Layer 3 period. What does this architectural and symbolic transformation signify? The shift from large, open circles to smaller, enclosed rectangles could reflect a change in ritual practices. The grand communal gatherings suggested by Layer 3 might have given way to ceremonies involving smaller groups, perhaps specific kin groups, lineages, or esoteric societies. The reduced scale of the pillars and the often simpler carvings might indicate a decline in the resources or manpower available, or perhaps a shift in focus away from monumental display towards more intimate ritual settings. This period, the PPNB, is precisely when early forms of plant cultivation and animal management were beginning to take hold in other parts of the Fertile Crescent. While the Gobekli Tepe builders themselves remained primarily hunter-gatherers during Layer 2, they were undoubtedly aware of these developments through their regional networks. Could the changes at Gobekli Tepe reflect hunter-gatherer societies adapting to a changing world? Perhaps the intense communal focus of Layer 3, which may have spurred initial experiments with resource management to feed the feasting crowds, gradually gave way to different social structures and beliefs as the Neolithic transition progressed elsewhere. Did the original impetus or the specific social conditions that fueled the creation of the Layer 3 megaliths simply fade? Yet the continuity is just as important as the change. The persistence of the T-pillar form, the continued use of animal symbolism, and the very act of building ritual structures on this specific hill demonstrate a deep connection to the traditions established centuries earlier. Gobekli Tepe remained a sacred place, a focal point for belief and ceremony, for well over a millennium, spanning the crucial transition from the pre-pottery Neolithic ebb to the pre-pottery Neolithic B. Layer 2 represents not an abandonment of the site's sacredness, but its adaptation and reinterpretation by succeeding generations facing new circumstances and perhaps evolving beliefs. The changing face of Gobekli Tepe, from the awe-inspiring circles of Layer 3 to the smaller, more numerous rooms of Layer 2, provides a fascinating narrative of cultural evolution etched in stone. It reveals a society grappling with its own traditions, adapting its sacred spaces over centuries. But even this later phase of activity eventually ceased. The final chapter in Gobekli Tepe's active history involves another profound mystery: the deliberate burial of the entire complex, preserving it for millennia until its rediscovery. Why did the people who revered this mountain for so long ultimately decide to cover it up and walk away? For over a millennium, generations of people poured immense effort into building, maintaining, modifying, and ultimately burying the structures on Gobekli Tepe. They quarried, moved, and erected hundreds of multi-ton pillars, carved intricate symbols, prepared special floors, and gathered in vast numbers. But why? What drew these hunter-gatherer groups back to this specific hilltop time and time again? What profound purpose did Gobekli Tepe serve? While the stones remain largely silent on the specifics, the accumulated evidence allows us to explore the compelling possibilities. We know it wasn't primarily a village or settlement. The lack of permanent houses, hearths, and everyday domestic refuse in the main ritual areas is striking. We know it was monumental, requiring unprecedented levels of coordinated labor. We see powerful, stylized anthropomorphic figures presiding over spaces filled with symbolically charged animals and abstract signs. We have evidence of enormous feasts, suggesting large-scale social gatherings, and we have hints, through fragmented human remains and possible skull cult practices, of complex beliefs surrounding death and the afterlife. Synthesizing these clues points towards Gobekli Tepe being a central place of ritual, belief, and social interaction, but the precise nature of that role remains open to interpretation. The late Klaus Schmidt, the lead excavator who brought Gobekli Tepe to the world's attention, consistently referred to it as the world's first temple, a central sanctuary for the hunter-gatherer populations of the region. He saw it as a sacred mountain, a place where people came together to engage with their cosmology, perhaps to interact with the powerful beings represented by the T-pillars. In this view, the enclosures were roofless ritual spaces, arenas for ceremonies that reinforced the shared beliefs binding these disparate groups together. The carvings weren't just decoration, they were integral parts of a complex mythology, perhaps depicting spirit journeys, creation stories, or the fundamental forces governing their world. What might religion have looked like for these people? We can't know for sure, but anthropological parallels in the site's iconography offer possibilities. It likely involved elements of animism, the belief that spirits inhabit animals, plants, rocks, and landscapes. The prominence of dangerous wild animals might reflect attempts to appease or harness their power. Shamanism is another strong possibility. The headless figure on the vulture stone, the abstract symbols, and the potentially trance-inducing nature of large, rhythmic gatherings could all point towards practices involving altered states of consciousness, where ritual specialists, shamans, journeyed to the spirit world for healing, divination, or knowledge. The treatment of human skulls also suggests ancestor veneration played a role, connecting the living community to its predecessors and the land. However, viewing Gobekli Tepe solely through a religious lens might be too narrow. It was likely also a crucial social hub. For hunter-gatherer groups, often dispersed across the landscape in smaller bands for much of the year, periodic aggregation sites are vital. Gobekli Tepe could have been the paramount location where these groups converged. Here, they could exchange information about resources, territories, and neighboring groups. It would have been a place to arrange alliances, negotiate partnerships, and find mates from outside their immediate kin group. The massive feasts, fueled by coordinated hunting efforts, weren't just ritual offerings. They were fundamental social events that built solidarity, displayed prestige, and obligated participants to future cooperation. Essential elements in managing a large, dispersed population without formal political structures. The construction projects themselves would have fostered intense collaboration and group identity. The evidence related to human remains points towards another significant function: a center for funerary rites. The possible excarnation scene on Pillar 43, the modified skull fragments suggesting a skull cult, and the general association of vultures with death in later regional iconography all hint that Gobekli Tepe played a key role in how these societies processed death and interacted with the dead. Perhaps it was the designated place for specific stages of complex, multi-stage burial practices, where the bodies of important individuals were prepared or their relics curated and venerated. Managing death and ensuring the proper transition of spirits could have been a central pillar of the ideology that demanded the site's construction. Could the sky have played a role? Some researchers propose that Gobekli Tepe also functioned as a rudimentary astronomical observatory. The overall site exhibits a general north-south orientation, and the central pillars in enclosures like D face roughly southeast, potentially aligning with sunrise at certain times of the year, like the winter solstice. Specific carvings, particularly on the vulture stone, have been speculatively linked to constellations used to mark time or commemorate events. For hunter-gatherers, acutely dependent on seasonal cycles for hunting and gathering, tracking celestial events would have been vital. While definitive proof of precise astronomical alignments remains elusive and debated, it's plausible that observing the sun, moon, and stars formed part of the rituals conducted here. Ultimately, Gobekli Tepe was likely not just one thing, but a complex, multifunctional center. It was almost certainly a place of profound religious significance, a nexus connecting the human world with the cosmos and the spirit realm. It was simultaneously a vital social arena, facilitating interaction, cooperation, and identity building among dispersed groups through feasting and shared labor. It incorporated important rituals surrounding death and ancestors, and it may well have involved careful observation of the heavens to understand time and the cycles of nature. These functions wouldn't have been mutually exclusive. They were likely deeply intertwined, reinforcing each other within a holistic worldview. We can only imagine the scenes. Processions moving across the hilltop, the air thick with smoke from fires and roasting meat, the sounds of chanting or music echoing off the stone pillars, large groups gathered around the central figures, perhaps witnessing rites performed by shamans or elders, stories being told through the carved images, alliances being forged over shared food and drink under the vast Anatolian sky. The power of Gobekli Tepe lay not just in its stone structures, but in the shared experiences, beliefs, and social bonds enacted within them. This shared purpose, this collective investment in maintaining their cosmic and social order, was deemed so crucial that it warranted the sustained, monumental effort that defines the site. For over 15 centuries, from roughly 9600 to 8000 BCE, Gobekli Tepe served as a potent center of ritual, community, and belief. Generations invested immense energy into this sacred mountain, building and rebuilding its unique structures. Yet, around the beginning of the 8th millennium BCE, after the era of the smaller rectangular rooms of Layer 2, activity at Gobekli Tepe ceased, and remarkably the site wasn't simply abandoned to the elements, it was deliberately and painstakingly buried. Archaeological excavations have revealed that the enclosures, both the grand circles of Layer 3 and the later rooms of Layer 2, were intentionally backfilled. This wasn't a gradual accumulation of wind-blown sand or slope wash. It was a massive, purposeful undertaking. The fill consists of tons of limestone rubble, earth, vast quantities of flint tools and manufacturing debris, countless animal bones, often fragmented, remnants of the feasts or disposal, and even broken pieces of pillars and sculptures. It seems the final act performed at Gobekli Tepe was to entomb it. Why would people who revered this place for so long intentionally bury it? This remains one of Gobekli Tepe's most profound mysteries. Several theories have been proposed. Perhaps it was a form of ritual decommissioning, a way to respectfully close the site, marking the end of a cosmic cycle or a specific era of belief, ensuring its power was contained. Some suggest it was an act of preservation, intentionally protecting the sacred structures for future generations or from perceived threats. Could it have been related to shifting beliefs? As the Neolithic revolution progressed, with agriculture and settled village life taking root more firmly elsewhere, perhaps the hunter-gatherer ideology embodied by Gobekli Tepe lost its relevance or was superseded by new worldviews. Maybe environmental changes or social restructuring diminished the site's importance or the ability to maintain it. It's even possible that burying the site was the final, grandest ritual performed there. Whatever the reason, this act of burial inadvertently created a time capsule, preserving Gobekli Tepe's secrets beneath meters of debris for nearly 10,000 years. And preserve it remained. The hill, known locally as Gobekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill, was noted in surveys in the 1960s, but dismissed as likely a medieval cemetery, the tops of some pillars mistaken for grave markers. It wasn't until 1994 that the site's true significance began to emerge. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, researching early Neolithic sites in the region, reviewed the earlier survey reports. Intrigued by the descriptions of flint scatters and unusual stones, he visited the hill. Almost immediately he recognized the tops of the T-shaped pillars and the abundance of pre-pottery Neolithic flint tools. He realized this was no cemetery, it was something far older, far more significant. Excavations began the following year under his direction, initiating one of the most revolutionary archaeological projects of our time. What Klaus Schmidt and his international team began to uncover fundamentally challenged our understanding of the human past. Decades of meticulous excavation have revealed the stunning enclosures, the intricate carvings, and the evidence of the sophisticated hunter-gatherers who built them. Yet, it's estimated that only a small fraction, perhaps 5 to 10%, of the entire complex has been explored. Geophysical surveys indicate that at least 15-20 similar enclosures may still lie hidden beneath the surface, promising decades, if not centuries, of future research and potential discoveries. The true legacy of Gobekli Tepe lies in how it has forced us to rewrite the narrative of human civilization. The long-accepted model held that agriculture was the prerequisite for complex society. First came farming, then settled villages, then surplus food, which allowed for social hierarchies, specialized labor, and eventually large-scale religious or monumental construction. Gobekli Tepe flips this sequence on its head. Here we have definitive proof of massive, sophisticated, monumental architecture and complex ritual organization emerging before the widespread adoption of agriculture and permanent large-scale settlements. This suggests that complex systems of belief, shared ideology, and the social cohesion generated by communal ritual activities may have been the driving force behind major societal transformations, not merely a consequence of them. Could the intense social organization and resource demands required to build Gobekli Tepe and sustain the associated feasts have actually spurred experimentation with food production and resource management, contributing to the later development of agriculture? Klaus Schmidt famously speculated, "First came the temple, then the city." Gobekli Tepe suggests that the human capacity for abstract thought, symbolic representation, shared belief, and large-scale cooperation was far more developed far earlier than previously imagined. It implies that the cognitive revolution, the changes in human thinking and sociality, may have preceded and even driven the Neolithic economic revolution. Today, Gobekli Tepe is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, protected by large shelters that allow visitors to witness its wonders while safeguarding it from the elements. It stands as a powerful monument not just to its creators, but to the potential of archaeological discovery to reshape our understanding of ourselves. It reminds us that history is not a simple linear progression, but a complex tapestry woven with diverse human experiences and astonishing achievements, many perhaps still buried beneath the earth. Gobekli Tepe remains enigmatic. We may never fully decipher the specific meanings of its symbols or the exact nature of the rituals performed there 12,000 years ago, but its existence is undeniable proof of the profound antiquity of human spiritual and social complexity. It is a message in stone from the dawn of the Neolithic, a testament to our ancestors' ingenuity, their deep need for meaning, and their ability to reshape their world through shared belief and collective action. The silent sentinels of Potbelly Hill have waited millennia to share their story, and we have only just begun to listen. Their secrets continue to challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of the vast, unexplored depths of human history. What secrets do you think still lie hidden? Let us know in the comments below. For more explorations into the unexplained, subscribe to the Purple Files. Thanks for watching.